Welcome to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso from Privada Wealth Management. In this podcast, we help you overcome financial worries and make sense of planning, investing, insurance, and banking. Join us for this journey as Rey draws from his expertise and interviews brilliant minds to help you enjoy life. The best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to Return on Lifestyle with Rey Descalso from Privada Wealth Management. Today, we are doing part one of a two-part series called Don't Scam Yourself in Retirement. Good afternoon, Rey. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking, sir. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's warm out, but nice cold sprinkler or a cold pool helps with that warmth.
Wonderful, man. Yeah, same here. Feels like about 110 degrees out, pretty much across the nation. Doesn't matter if you live here in Central Florida or parts unknown. Everybody's baking. So yeah, fun times.
Yeah. If cookies were involved, that's the kind of baking I like. I'm not so keen on the sidewalk baking.
Not so much.
Yeah. All right. So don't scam yourself in retirement. Yeah, I'm interested to see what we get into today. Where do we want to start with this topic?
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to take actually two parts today, and then we'll do another podcast as well on retirement scams. You know, this is sort of a play on words because typically you hear about someone being tricked by fake news or a Nigerian email scam. But what I want to talk about today is really understanding that we are the ones who trick ourselves. And so we want to talk a little bit about things called cognitive bias and logical fallacy. Now, I know that sounds kind of fancy, and it is fancy. But at the end of the day, all it means is broken thinking, bad thinking. And those kind of bad thinkings that we'll cover today, we'll do a couple, and we'll see how far we get. But ultimately, we can fool ourselves. So there are definitely, when you get into retirement, especially, we're concerned about people with diminished capacity getting phone calls that they won the lottery and, give us your banking number. There are scams out there, but I think more than likely what we're unaware of is how we can fool ourselves, how we can scam ourselves with broken thinking. The fancy term is cognitive biases or logical fallacies, and I'd like to cover a few today.
All right. Where do we start with this?
Excellent. Well, today, one of my goals is to lower everybody's self-esteem. So let's start off with my first bias I want to cover is overconfidence bias. So what in the world? Let me first define overconfidence bias. Then I'll give you an example from your everyday life. And then I'll give you an example of how it affects you as a person who's preparing for retirement or you're in retirement. So overconfidence bias, what it is when you attribute too much of your good results to your ability to control the situation versus it just being luck or statistics or, just the way things are. And also too, overconfidence bias is sometimes forgetting, how dumb you are. In other words, you think, hey, I'm fantastic. And so a life example, there's a bunch of life examples of this. So I don't know about you, but here in my office, one of my favorite things to do is to throw trash into a trash can from far, far away. Okay?
Nice.
Yes, exactly. Here's a great example of this. I was at a summer camp, Christian summer camp. I was teaching archery. I had zero archery ability, but it didn't matter.
But you're the teacher.
Yeah, I just wanted the job,
Fantastic, yeah.
Right, yeah. I want to hang out with my friends. They all were going to go at summer camp and whatever. And there was one job left was archery. And they said, well, can you teach archery? And I said, can I teach archery? And kind of scoffed. Right, I didn't say yes or no. I just gave them. So I got the job. And,
you didn't even answer. You just like, can I teach archery?
Like, how dare you even question? Look at me.
That's fantastic.
Anyway, so I get the job, and the guy who hired me was a friend of mine, and he's like, you'll figure it out. So I read the book on archery and got all these kids. Basically it's safety. Don't let the kids spear each other with bow and arrow. Well,
yeah. So did the kids see you reading the archery book?
No,
Archery for Dummies.
We had about a week ahead of time to plan on this.
So they didn't see that book. Good.
About, we start with little kids and we go all the way up. So by about the week, we had 13-year-olds. They can just sense weakness. And so one of the kids said, we haven't seen you shoot a bow and arrow. Can you do it? And long story short, I said, the same thing. Can I shoot a bow and arrow? But they didn't fall for the bluff. And so so I said, look, everybody stand back. All right. And I had a moving target. It was a smiley face on styrofoam. And the funniest thing that happened is I remember pulling back that arrow thinking, I had shot a little bit and so forth, but I didn't, I was nobody special. And the kids were yanking the string that controlled the moving target very erratically. Geez. So there was really no skate, Wayne Gretzky says skate to where the puck is. There was no trend to follow, let's just say. Pulled back and figure I'm going to miss it simply because, it's just too erratic. It was bouncing up and down. It wasn't just going side to side. I fire off an arrow and I pop the nose balloon and it pops and all of the kids just go bananas. They just go crazy and they're like, this guy.
Awesome.
One of the high points of my, marriage, birth of my child, baptism, there were some great times in my life. This is up there. This is in the top 6. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pinnacle right there, baby.
Right. So, and then of course too, I'm peacocking around the rest of the time. But the reality of it is a lot of times in life, there's luck. The fact that I was able to actually hit that was not something that I could even control. And unfortunately in life, we like to think of talking about kids, Garrison Keillor used to have the radio show Lake Wobegon where all the kids are above average. Think about that for a second. How in the world can all of us be above average?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everybody's a special snowflake. And unfortunately, when it comes to retirement, so that's how it happens in life. We forget about luck. We forget about things. And we sometimes just pat ourselves on the back and have too high a self-esteem. And when it comes to retirement, what I'm seeing right now, is that not everybody, but a lot of folks really were disenchanted in 2008 with my industry, the financial advice industry. And they either switched advisors or they said, I'll do this myself, Yeah. And for those who in 2009, 10 or 11 and started investing and they bought the S&P 500 and they, read a few things, but really they just kind of set and forget it. They're looking now backwards at a 10-year bull market. And it was funny. I was at a seminar and everybody, one of the presenters said, how many of you feel like over the last 10 years, your clients think you're fantastic? And of course, all of us raise our hands. And the reality is, he says, well, that's because they're overconfident in you. They're overconfident because they've had a great situation over the last 10 years of a bull market. And so that overconfidence that we have as investors, including advisors as well, we've got to be careful because we have to make sure that we have somebody whispering in our ear things that we don't want to hear. Okay. Yeah. And one of the concerns I really have about the retail person who's out there listening to this is going it alone is just it's dangerous. It's dangerous. I highly recommend you get a doctor and then you also get what? A second opinion. That's a common thing in medicine. And I would recommend you get a second opinion when it comes to your retirement plan. That it's something that we should really, if you're giving yourself your own opinion, definitely get a second opinion. There's a lot of great advisors out there who would be more than happy to sit down with you and poke holes in your confidence. And that's okay. You need to have that. We all need to have that. That's why here at Privada Wealth Management, we use a team. There's 3 advisors, and then there's also Barbara, and we look at everything and say, where are the blind spots? And that's important that you as a person do that as well. That's the solution for that.
Yeah, Ray, I was just thinking that one of the things is there are people listening to this. Hopefully, there are probably people in this that are listening to this. If they're not, they're in the area around you somewhere. In Florida, there has got to be at least a handful of people that said, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. And they put in hundreds of hours of study, and they have been following everything diligently for the last 10 years, and they're doing fantastic because they've taken the time to do that. I bet there's probably at least 5 or 6 of those in Florida, probably 5 or 6 in each state. But if you're not one of those people that has put in hundreds and hundreds of hours, equivalent to what a financial advisor has to go through to get licensed and be able to do his job or her job, you do need that second opinion. Because there may come a time, Ray, when somebody walks into your office and said, this is what I've done. Here's all my stuff. This is the study that I've done. Take a look at my plan. And you may look at it and say, wow, that's fantastic. You're doing great. And I think you're pretty safe here. It looks like you've covered all the bases. But I'm thinking about 99.9% of the people out there that are doing it themselves haven't covered everything. And so it would be incredibly valuable to be able to have anybody take a look at it and be able to, like you said, poke some holes in it, challenge their thinking. It's not a confidence or pride issue. It's just, hey, have you thought about this? This is something that we think about all the time in this office because that's part of planning.
Right. Exactly. And so if you're in the business of making sure you're not overconfident, you're in a better place. And that's what we do. We try our best to look at all of the possible risks, including our own minds. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So confirmation bias is the next one that I want to talk about.
Hang on, before we move on.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I got one more example for the overconfidence bias for my own life. I mean, you gave us an example, and I just want to give you a quick one. And we've talked about it a little bit before. I love what you've said, because you gave me some notes attributing too much of your good results to your ability to control the situation instead of luck or statistics. But really, I stop at that, controlling the situation. I told you about that minivan, right?
Right.
We leased a minivan for an incredibly large payment every month. I went in completely overconfident. I've bought cars before. I've done this before. This is not going to be a problem. I'm not going to go over my budget. And then I was way too confident in my own ability to control the situation. But statistically, I became one of those guys that got suckered into a van that was way too expensive because the emotion of it, the excitement of it. I never thought that I would fall into that, but I was way overconfident, and I got stuck for 3 years in a lease that just tore my budget up. We could afford it, but we couldn't afford to do any extra retirement planning or anything like that would have been really valuable for that money to go to. So yeah, it can happen in a lot of different arenas.
Yes. People underestimate new car smell. It is overwhelming. You get that, the emotions in general. Mm-hmm. You're just like, it can overwhelm you, and you don't even realize it's happened. Broken thinking. So
3 TVs. Christmas.
Exactly.
Right. So confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation bias, and all of these kind of, as I give you an example, I can talk about 3 or 4 happening at the same time. But confirmation bias specifically is agreeing only with information that agrees with you. So a certain topic can have lots of facets, and those different facets have many facts. They're all true, but they don't necessarily tell the whole story. So what do? You Google it, and you get your facts, and you get your opinion validated. You confirm what you already thought anyways. Mm-hmm. And one of the great examples of this is pretty much anything that gets debated on Facebook. You see your friends, and they'll say something political, and half of them will say rah, 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 and the other half will say boo, and then everybody starts citing their favorite facts. One of my favorite right now on my timeline are climate change debates. And it's really fun because it's 110 degrees in Lake Wobegon, up in Minnesota somewhere, and it's 110 degrees here in Central Florida. And so that means everybody complains, and as they complain, we're like, well, yeah, that's because of climate change. And then someone will chime in and say, no, that's not how it works. And what's interesting about confirmation bias is I can take either side of any debate, whether it be climate change or this or that, and I can find you enough facts that agree with everything in this information age. And so confirmation bias, the issue would be is that you are simply coming in there with a feeling like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Back when you're talking about going to church, you go to church and they preach a sermon. There's 2 types of ways to read the Bible. One is exegetical and one is eisegetical. Exegetical means you read it and you figure out what it says. Eisegetical is you come up with what you want it to say and you twist it to make sure that's what it is.
Nice.
Yeah, right. And so throughout history, just like religion, politics, when it comes to your money, we tend to do the same thing. We tend to have an idea, and then we go seeking other people or facts that prove our idea. And where I see this, and I see this happen in lots of areas, but I see this happen with folks who they tend to follow a guru, a money guru, and that money guru has a system that works, or and so with their system they have rules, and one of the rules could be, hey, whatever you do, you need to do it this way, and one of the ways is they'll say something to the effect of XYZ type of an investment is always bad. Let me give you an example. Right now, you can go and turn on a radio show or a TV show, and they'll say annuities are always bad, right? Well, the reality of it is I can tell you stories, people who've sat in my office where they come and they're like, hey, here's what I've got. And this happens quite often. I've got, a friend of mine was in the business. He's not in the business anymore. And we put all of my rollover into this annuity. And this annuity, it's got, I think it has to be there 4 more years. You know what? I found out that the fees are like 3.9%, and it's really the market's on fire and I'm making like 3.4%, after everything's said and done.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And I just, my shoulders droop and I got to tell them, hey, this is not an ideal situation. You're over concentrated. You got high fees. You've got all these bells and whistles you didn't know you had and you didn't necessarily want. And then I can also tell you stories where people came in and used annuities with pinpoint accuracy, much like a doctor gives medicine. It doesn't medicine is good or bad. It's just was exactly what the patient needed. And I see when people come in for that second opinion service that we do for our clients and friends, they'll sit down and do a second opinion service. I'm like, no, this is perfect. I'm so happy for you. This is going to work. Here's how it's going to work. Here's why it's going to work. And they're like, really? But I heard that, such thus and so. And it's difficult when you're working with people when they've got confirmation bias and you say something that they weren't expecting because they are looking to feel better about what they already thought. And in our business of giving advice, we've got to tell people, hey, there's more to the story. And so that's an example how in retirement, we can kind of scam ourselves. We can kind of go out there saying, I want to find somebody who can prove me right. I want to find the facts that prove my opinions right. And that is dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next one I want to talk about is sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost fallacy. I've heard of the other two. I'd heard of overconfidence bias and confirmation bias, and we talked about that actually before at one point briefly. But sunk cost fallacy. This is interesting. What is that?
Well, it's a logical mistake that basically says, hey, if I give up now, then all this time, all this sweat, all this, treasure that I've poured into this project, well, it's lost. So what I'm going to do, here's a brilliant idea. I'm going to put more time, talent, and treasure into this. Okay, so here's a great example. And for some reason, when you and I talk, it always comes back to food. But so you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? And this is always a mistake for a guy like me. You go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you pay $15, and there's a place just down the street. It's all-you-can-eat sushi, and sushi's good, and sushi's expensive. So I'm like, I think it's $18 actually. It's sad. It's sad what I do because I'm full. It doesn't even taste good, but I'm like, hey, I'm $18 in. I'm going to just, I'm going to keep
can't
eating.
Stop now.
Right. It's the principle.
They just brought out another tray.
Right. That's sunk cost fallacy. And it doesn't just work with that kind of thing. I mean, imagine if it was bad sushi. This sushi is absolutely terrible. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get food poisoning, but I did pay for it. Right. Yeah. So it's easy to laugh at until, the next day you're in the ER. And this is true. I also make this joke, here at the office, I've got a storage closet and I've got stuff in there. I've got keyboards and mice, not mice, the keyboard mouses, mices, what I'm saying? I've got all kinds of equipment and I won't toss it because I paid, $5, $10 or $100 for a monitor that really is outdated. But if I throw it away, that's admitting defeat. So if I keep it someday, they'll come up with
You could use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Paperweight or something. Yeah.
So this is really easy in retirement. Any kind of asset that you have that isn't doing what it's supposed to do, you don't want to admit you're wrong. You don't want it. You think, hey, I'm just going to hold on 1 minute longer to this stock, this rental property, to this relationship that I have with a professional giving me advice. Because if I stop now, I'll lose that time, that money, that sweat equity, that I put into it. And the thing is cutting your losses. And so the remedy for sunk cost fallacy is having rules, relationship rules, having money rules, having investing rules that are very important, having spending rules on your budget, to say, I'm going to put this much money into this project and then I'm done. So there's so many ways that sunk cost fallacy hurts you. And if you can understand and learn how to cut your losses and have a plan ahead of time, planning in general helps us to say, all right, this was a waste of time. And you know what? We're full. We got our money's worth and we can't get any more. We're out. And
give me an example of that from a client, right? Or a prospect. Let's put it that way. Client or prospect, they've come to you, you're going through their stuff and you see something, you identify something that, they're hanging on to for the wrong reasons. Yeah. How does that conversation go as far as how do you help them to flip that script or to be able to recognize there is an attachment to this that is unhealthy? And let's talk about that.
Yeah, typically what ends up happening is the new car smell of a stock. So it starts with overconfidence bias. They bought stock XYZ. It was all the rage, right? They bought high, it's going down, but
they're hanging on to that blockbuster stock, right? Is that what it is? That's a good example there.
Yeah, so it's coming back, and if I sell now and I take that loss, well, I don't have any gains to, gains there that I can have it against and so forth. And I just really, there's no logic actually. It's the absence of logic. It's emotion, and typically it's positions they don't want to get out of because they don't want to admit they're wrong and they don't want to necessarily take that loss. Never mind that should the trend reverse, we could go back into that sector or that stock or that position. It's not logical anymore. It's not rules based, and so it's easy to talk about rental properties. Or real estate are a good example of that as well.
Oh, yeah.
The money traps that you talk about where someone buys this dream home or someone who's restoring a car, and it's been on blocks in their backyard and the homeowners association's ready to evict them. We do this a lot as human beings because we got to move on, and it's tough to move on. It's tough to have that conversation. All of these are difficult conversations with both clients and prospective clients because you're taking them down a notch, but at the same time, on the other side of it, I'm telling you, there's a sense of freedom. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I would think once they have that epiphany, and they can take that step to get rid of that unhealthy whatever it is, there is that sigh of relief, right? It's got to be, I would imagine.
That's exactly right.
I turned that van in, I was so happy.
Right.
Oh my Lord, I'm telling you. Of course, they were trying to sell it to me. Hey, you only have to pay the extra $13,000 or $16,000, and it's actually yours. And who's driven it in the past. I'm like, here's the second set of keys. Bye.
Overconfidence to buy it, and then sunk cost to almost you take it home for forever. Yeah, these tend to daisy chain and string together, and then that's why we'll wrap it up with recency bias. And recency bias, I kind of alluded to this when I talked about overconfidence bias, and that basically is saying is what just happened is going to keep happening, right? So a good example of this was, you remember your grandpa who lived through the Depression? For me, it's actually my father who was raised very poor in the Philippines. So I remember as a kid, we would use paper cups and we'd throw them away. And I remember he came home from work one day and we had dinner, and he actually had missed dinner, come home and he saw us throwing these paper cups away. And he's like, "Why are you throwing these paper cups away? We should wash these. These are reusable." And I was like, "What? These are not these are paper cups." And we went, 5 minutes discussing, and I remember like it was yesterday. And it dawned on me, it's because his recency is what? Scarcity. He's like, we gotta stretch all of our resources. We gotta, do what we gotta do. And my recency is there's always more paper cups. Every single weekend, more paper cups appear. It's like a fruit growing on a tree. I don't know how it happens, but that's my recency. And so I mentioned the people who think, man, I'm fantastic at stock picking because in this last 10-year bull market, I've done nothing but win, right? And I see that so often. And what just happened doesn't mean anything. A lot of folks have forgotten the Depression, forgotten 2001 to 2003 or 2007 to 2009. And we have to understand, and we say conversely, in 2010, 11, and 12, a lot of people were just licking their wounds and crying, and they weren't in the market and missed the bull market altogether. So recency bias makes us think that it's whatever it is happening now will continue forever. But that's life, and then also in retirement and investments especially, we have to remember past performance is no guarantee of future results. It says it on every mutual fund prospectus because whoever made them put that rule there, I don't know what governing body, knows that as human beings, we think that we can look in a rearview mirror and predict the future.
Exactly.
Right? Nobody here, go back to your minivan. You don't go in the minivan, look in the rear view and say, okay, we're passing Chick-fil-A. So probably in about 30 seconds, I should take a hard left, with the blinders on the front window. You don't do that. The rear view mirror doesn't make any sense. But too many of us do that. And we do that with politics. We do that with taxes. We do that in predicting the future. We use what just happened to say, I know exactly what's going to happen next. And folks, if anybody tells you that, they're either a fortune teller, on the radio, doesn't matter who they are. It's not true. And if you tell that to yourself, then you're scamming yourself in retirement. Don't do it. Get a second opinion. And really, with all of these things, I think that's the key. The key is talking to somebody you can get to know and trust and have them looking over your shoulder to check you, to say, are we overconfident? Are we just looking for information that confirms what we already thought?
Mm-hmm.
Are we too emotionally attached to this, to this sunken cost that we're not going to cut our losses? And are we really living so myopically that we don't look at the broad scope of history and we're only looking at the last 3 to 6 months? And when you can have those kind of conversations, it can really strengthen your retirement preparation. It can really strengthen your retirement experience, not just in your finances, but in life in general. So if you're interested, give us a ring. We'd love to give you that second opinion and talk with you a little bit about how some of the mistakes that we commonly make, we can plan for it and we can put some strategies in there to where it will be minimized in your life.
Yeah, I agree. Bottom line is, unless the person you're talking to that's telling you that they can see that future just appeared out of a lamp that you rubbed, I would be very cautious. And on the flip side of that coin, if the person you are talking to just magically appeared out of a lamp that you rubbed, go see a doctor.
That's true.
Because
that's true.
You probably need some medication. I'm just saying.
A second opinion.
A second opinion. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, Ray, I know this was part 1, right? So can you give us just a sneak preview of what you're going to be talking about in part 2?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to talk about 4 other ways that you can really, really mess up your retirement. And some of those things that people look at and they think I'm good to go, and they're not, because the biases and the fallacies and the broken thinking just can shipwreck you. And I'll give you some examples and some stories from anecdotes of my own life, but also from history.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast with Rey Descalso. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Ray comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Thanks again for listening today. For everyone at Privada Wealth Management, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Return on Lifestyle podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Privada Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider for any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The following program is sponsored by Privada Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content. Advisory services offered through J.W. Cole Advisors Incorporated. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial Incorporated. Member IFNRA, SIPC. Privada Wealth Management is an unaffiliated entity from J.W. Cole Advisors and J.W. Cole Financial. The opinions expressed by Rey Descalso should not be construed as specific investment, legal, or tax advice. All economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. Investing may involve the risk of loss of principal. Any tax advice on this show is not intended to be used by any person for the purpose of avoiding U.S. federal or state tax penalties that may be imposed on such person, and each listener should seek advice from their tax advisor or legal counsel on topics that arise from the show. Nothing should be construed as solicitation of an offer to buy securities. The preceding program is sponsored by Privada Wealth Management, which is solely responsible for its content.